Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the battleship Defiance and watched the stars through the main viewing window. The ship was quiet at this hour. Most of the crew was sleeping, but could not sleep. He had received a message from the Galactic Council 3 hours ago, and the words still burned in his mind. Earth is summoned to answer for crimes against galactic peace. 30 years, 30 years of service, 30 years of blood and sacrifice, and now they called humanity criminals. Was 52 years old. He had gray hair at his temples and lines around his eyes from too many years of war. He had joined the United Earth Fleet when he was 22, a young man full of hope and dreams about exploring the galaxy. Back then, humanity had just made first contact with the Galactic Council. They had discovered that they were not alone in the universe. 12 great species controlled the galaxy, and they had been doing so for thousands of years. Humanity was small. Earth was just one planet. The Council species had hundreds of worlds each. They had technology that seemed like magic. They had fleets that could destroy Earth in a matter of hours, and they had looked at humanity the way a person might look at an insect. But the Council had a problem. The galaxy was not a peaceful place. There were threats everywhere: pirates, rebels, hostile species that refused to join the Council. The great powers had grown soft over the centuries. They had forgotten how to fight. They needed soldiers. They needed humans. Remembered the day the Council made their offer. They would give humanity access to advanced technology. They would allow humans to colonize new worlds. They would treat Earth as a junior member of the galactic community. In exchange, humanity would serve as the Council's military arm. Human soldiers would fight the wars that the other species did not want to fight. Earth's leaders had agreed. What choice did they have? The alternative was to remain trapped on one planet, vulnerable to any species that decided humans were a threat. At least this way, humanity would have a chance to grow. And so the dying began. Closed his eyes and saw the faces of the dead. So many faces. Friends who had burned in the void of space. Soldiers who had been torn apart by alien weapons. Young men and women who had left Earth full of hope and returned in metal boxes, or did not return at all. The swarm war had been the worst. There were insect-like creatures that reproduced at an incredible rate. When their population grew too large, they would swarm across space, consuming everything in their path. The Council had known about the swarm for centuries, but they had always managed to redirect it toward uninhabited regions. Then the swarm had changed direction. It was heading straight for They were one of the founding species of the Council. They were peaceful scholars who had not fought a war in 2,000 years. They had no army. They had no fleet capable of stopping the swarm. So they called for help, and humanity answered. Had been a captain then commanding a destroyer called the Relentless. He remembered the first time he saw the swarm. Billions of creatures, each one the size of a small shuttle, moving through space like a living wave. They did not think. They did not negotiate. They just consumed. The battle lasted for 3 months. Humanity lost 200 ships. 40,000 soldiers died. Watched the Relentless burn around him as swarm creatures tore through the hull. He was one of only 17 survivors from a crew of 300. But they won. They stopped the swarm. They saved thee and its 12 billion inhabitants. They had thanked them. The Council had given humanity a few more colony worlds, and then everyone had moved on, as if 40,000 human lives were just a number in a report. The door to the bridge opened, and Commander Lisa Grant walked in. She was second in command and his closest friend. They had served together for 15 years. She was 45 years old, with short brown hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. "You should be sleeping," she said. "So should you." Lisa walked over to stand beside him. She looked out at the stars with the same expression he knew was on his own face. Tired, angry, determined. "I've been going through the Council's charges," she said. "They claim we violated 17 treaties by expanding into the Orion sector." The Orion sector was promised to us after the campaign. High Arbiter gave his word. His word means nothing. It never did. Lisa pulled out a tablet and handed it to. I found something interesting. They have been negotiating with the for mining rights in the Orion sector. The deal was signed 6 months ago. Looked at the document on the tablet. His hands tightened until his knuckles turned white. They gave away our territory we earned with blood. It gets worse. They have been rebuilding their fleet. The Council knows about it, but they're not doing anything. Some of our intelligence people think the Council is planning to use the against us if we become too powerful. Set the tablet down carefully. If he held it any longer, he might break it. How long have they been planning this? Years, probably. We were useful when we were weak and desperate. Now we have 200 colony worlds and a fleet that rivals any Council species. We're not their attack dogs anymore. We're a threat. Had always known this day would come. He had hoped it would not come in his lifetime. He had hoped that by the time humanity became too powerful to control, they would have built enough alliances and earned enough respect to be accepted as equals. He had been a fool. Wake Captain Daniel said, and send a message to Admiral Price at Fleet Command. Tell her to begin Protocol 7. Lisa's eyes widened. Protocol 7, that's... I know what it is. It's our insurance policy. The one we hoped we would never have to use, turned away from the window. The Council has made their move. Now we make ours. The Defiance arrived at the Council station 3 days later. The station orbited a gas giant in the neutral zone, a massive structure that served as the seat of galactic government. Ships from a dozen species surrounded it, their weapons cold but ready. Put on his dress uniform for the first time in years. He hated the thing. It was stiff and uncomfortable and covered with medals that reminded him of battles he would rather forget. But this was a formal summons. Protocol demanded that he look the part. Lisa and Daniel accompanied him to the shuttle bay. Daniel was younger than both of them, only 35 years old. He had blonde hair and a face that still looked innocent despite everything he had seen. Had taken him under his wing 10 years ago, after Daniel's entire squad was killed in a pirate ambush. The young man had talent and determination. He reminded of himself at that age. Remember, said as they boarded the shuttle, we're here to listen and respond. Nothing more. Do not let them provoke you. Do not show weakness. And do not, under any circumstances, apologize for anything. Understood, sir, Daniel said. Lisa just nodded. She knew the game they were playing. She had been playing it almost as long as had. The shuttle crossed the distance between the Defiance and the Council station in 20 minutes, watched through the window as they approached. The station was beautiful in a cold, intimidating way. It was shaped like a spiral, with arms extending outward like the petals of a flower. Each arm belonged to a different Council species. The central hub, where the Council chamber was located, was neutral territory. They docked at the human arm of the station. A delegation was waiting for them. Recognized Ambassador Stephen Park, Earth's representative to the Council. Stephen was a small man with a nervous disposition. He was a good diplomat but a poor leader. He had spent too many years learning to bow and scrape to the Council powers. Admiral Cole, Stephen said, his voice tight with worry. Thank you for coming. I've been trying to negotiate with the Arbiter, but... I'm sure you've done your best, Ambassador said, walking past him. Now let me do mine. The Council chamber was at the heart of the station. It was a massive room, large enough to hold thousands of beings. The ceiling was transparent, showing the stars above. The floor was made of something that looked like crystal but was harder than diamond. At the center of the room was a crescent-shaped table where the Council members sat. Behind them, tiered seating held representatives and observers from across the galaxy. Walked into the chamber with Lisa and Daniel at his sides. Every eye in the room turned to watch them. He could feel the weight of their stares, the mixture of curiosity and contempt and fear. Mostly fear, he noted. That was interesting. High Arbiter sat at the center of the crescent table. He was one of the oldest species in the galaxy. His body was tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin like polished obsidian. He had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his face. The primary eyes, the larger ones, showed his conscious thoughts. The secondary eyes, smaller and set above the primary ones, revealed his true emotions. Had learned to read expressions years ago. Right now, his primary eyes showed calm authority. His secondary eyes showed something very different. They showed fear. Admiral Cole of the United Earth Fleet announced, his voice resonating through the chamber. You have been summoned to answer charges of treaty violations and acts of aggression against galactic peace. How do you respond? Stopped in the center of the room, exactly where the light from above made him most visible. He had learned long ago that politics was theater. Every gesture mattered. I respond with a question, High Arbiter. What violations, what acts of aggression? Gestured with one of his upper arms. A holographic display appeared in the air, showing a map of the galaxy. Several regions were highlighted in red. Earth has expanded into the Orion sector, which is designated as protected territory under the Galactic Preservation Act. Earth's military has grown beyond the limits set by the Defense Standardization Treaty. Earth has constructed shipyards capable of producing capital-class vessels, which is forbidden to junior member species. These actions were approved by this council, interrupted. He heard gasps from the observers. No one interrupted the High Arbiter. The Orion sector was granted to humanity as compensation for our losses in the campaign. I have the documents. Would you like to see them? Circumstances have changed. The Council has determined that those grants were made in error. I see, and our fleet expansion. Was that also an error? Secondary eyes flickered. He was getting annoyed. Good. The expansion was approved for specific defensive purposes. Those purposes have been fulfilled. The expansion is no longer necessary. Laughed, it was not a pleasant sound. Not necessary, I see. So when the swarm was heading for Prime, our fleet expansion was very necessary. When pirates were disrupting trade across half the galaxy, our ships were essential. When the rebellion threatened to tear your precious council apart, you begged us, to send more soldiers, more ships, more humans to die for your causes. He stepped forward and, despite himself, leaned back slightly. But now that the threats are gone, threats that we eliminated, suddenly we are too powerful. Suddenly we are a danger to galactic peace. Tell me, High Arbiter, what changed? Did we become more aggressive? Did we attack anyone? Did we do anything except exactly what you asked us to do? The chamber was silent. Could feel thousands of eyes on him. Some were hostile, some were sympathetic, some were simply watching to see what would happen next. The Council has voted, said, his voice harder now. Earth will withdraw from all colonial holdings beyond your home system. Your fleet will be reduced to defensive capabilities only. Failure to comply will result in Earth being declared a rogue state. The combined fleets of the Council will enforce compliance. Stood very still for a long moment, then he smiled. You want us to give up everything we've built, everything we've earned. You want us to crawl back to our single planet and wait for the next time you need someone to die for you. Those are the terms. They are not negotiable. Then I have terms of my own, reached into his uniform and pulled out a small device. This is a communication relay. It's connected to every ship in the Earth Armada. Right now, those ships are scattered across the galaxy. Some of them are in places you know about. Most of them are not. Secondary eyes widened. The fear that had been hiding there was now spreading to his primary eyes. You would not dare threaten this council. I'm not threatening anyone, High Arbiter. I'm explaining the situation. You see, we knew this day would come. We knew that eventually you would decide we were too dangerous to let live free. So we prepared. He pressed a button on the device. The holographic display changed, showing new information. Red dots appeared across the map of the galaxy, hundreds of them, then thousands. "Those are our ships," said. 17 carrier groups at your primary trade routes, 400 destroyers at strategic jump gates, 93 stealth vessels in orbit around your capital worlds. And that's just what we're willing to show you." The chamber erupted in chaos. Council members were shouting at each other. Observers were scrambling for the exits. Was on his feet, his 4 arms gesturing wildly. "This is an act of war. You will be destroyed." "Will we?" His voice cut through the noise like a knife. "Let me tell you what will happen if you try. Within 6 hours of any attack on Earth or our colonies, your trade networks will collapse. Your economies will crash. Billions of your citizens will starve. And that's before we start shooting back." He walked closer to the table, ignoring the guards who moved to intercept him. They were hesitant, uncertain. They had never dealt with a human who was not afraid. "We spent 30 years learning how your galaxy works, High Arbiter. We know every weakness. We know every pressure point. We know exactly how fragile your peace really is. And we know that you cannot stop us. Not quickly. Not without losing more than you could ever afford to lose." Stared at him. For the first time, the mask of authority was completely gone. All 4 of his eyes showed the same thing now. Terror. "What do you want?" the Arbiter asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Told him. The negotiations lasted for 72 hours. Did not sleep during that time. Neither did Lisa or Daniel. They worked in shifts, one of them always at the table while the others monitored the situation across the galaxy. The Council tried everything. They offered compromises. They made threats. They attempted to bribe individual human officers. They even tried to assassinate, though the attempt was so clumsy that he almost felt insulted. None of it worked. In the end, the Council had no choice. They agreed to every demand. Full recognition of all human colonial claims, a permanent seat on the Galactic Council with veto power, access to all restricted technology archives, reparations for every human life lost in service to the Council, and a formal apology broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Stood on the bridge of the Defiance and watched the broadcast. His face filled the screen, his voice reciting the words that humanity had waited 30 years to hear. The Galactic Council formally recognizes its debt to the people of Earth. For 3 decades, humanity has served as our shield and our sword. They have fought our wars. They have died in our defense. They have sacrificed more than any species should ever be asked to sacrifice. The Arbiter's voice faltered, but he continued. "We repaid this service with ingratitude. We sought to diminish them when they grew strong. We forgot that strength earned through sacrifice deserves honor, not fear. For these failures, the Council offers its deepest apologies. We ask for humanity's forgiveness, though we know we do not deserve it." The broadcast ended. The bridge of the Defiance was silent. Lisa walked over to stand beside. "It's done," she said. "We won." "Did we?" Watched the stars through the window. "We forced them to say the words, but words are easy. Actions are harder. They'll try again. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but eventually they'll try to destroy us again. Then we'll be ready, just like we were this time." Nodded slowly. She was right, they would be ready. They had no choice. He thought about the 40,000 who had died in the Swarm War, the 12,000 who had fallen against the 60,000 who had given their lives in the campaign, all those faces, all those names, all those sons and daughters of Earth who would never see their homes again. They had not died for nothing. Their sacrifice had built something, a fleet, a people, a force that the galaxy could not ignore. "Send orders to all ships," said. "Maintain positions but stand down from combat readiness. We're not conquerors. We don't want to rule them. We just want to be left alone. And if they don't leave us alone." Turned to face her. His eyes were cold and hard. the eyes of a man who had seen too much death and was willing to see more if necessary. Then they'll learn why they should have. 3 months passed. The galaxy slowly adjusted to the new reality. Human ships moved freely through space that had once been forbidden to them. Human colonists expanded into territories that had been promised and then stolen. Human merchants traded as equals with species that had once looked down on them. Not everyone was happy. Some council species resented the change. They whispered in dark corners about humanity's arrogance, humanity's aggression, humanity's dangerous ambition. They dreamed of putting humans back in their place. But they did nothing. The fear was too strong. Remained aboard the Defiance, though he spent less time on the bridge now. There were meetings to attend, policies to debate, decisions to make. The work of building a future was harder than the work of fighting wars. He was tired. He was old. He wanted to rest. But rest would have to wait. Lisa found him in his quarters one evening, staring at a photograph. It showed a young woman with dark hair and a bright smile. Her name was Rachel, and she had been his wife. She had died 20 years ago, killed when a raider destroyed the transport she was traveling on. "You're thinking about her again," Lisa said. "I think about her every day." Set the photograph down. She believed in what we were doing. She thought that if we worked hard enough and sacrificed enough, we would earn our place in the galaxy. She thought they would learn to respect us. She wasn't wrong. They do respect us now. No, they fear us. That's not the same thing. Stood and walked to the window. I wanted her to be right. I wanted to believe that we could prove ourselves through service and honor. Instead, we proved ourselves through threats and force. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Maybe that's the only proof they understand." Did not answer. Maybe she was right. Maybe the only language the galaxy understood was power. Maybe humanity had been foolish to think otherwise. But somewhere deep in his heart, he still wished things could have been different. The years passed. Eventually retired from active service, though he remained an advisor to Fleet Command. He watched as a new generation took his place, young men and women who had grown up knowing that humanity was strong. They did not remember the early days when humans were servants and soldiers and expendable tools. They only knew that Earth was powerful now, and they intended to keep it that way. Lisa became an admiral herself. She commanded the Second Fleet for 10 years before retiring to write her memoirs. Daniel rose through the ranks to become the youngest fleet admiral in Earth's history. He was a good leader, fair and firm, and he remembered the lessons that had taught him. The Council never tried to betray humanity again. They had learned their lesson, but knew that fear was not the same as peace. Fear could be overcome. Fear could turn to hatred, and hatred could lead to war. So humanity remained vigilant. They kept their fleets strong. They watched their borders. They trusted no one completely, not even their allies, because they had learned the hardest lesson the galaxy had to teach. The only one you can truly trust is yourself. Cole died at the age of 87, surrounded by his family and friends. His last words were a quote from an old Earth poet, words that had guided him through 30 years of war and 20 years of peace. "Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light." They carved those words on his tomb, and above them they placed the symbol of the United Earth Fleet, a blue planet surrounded by stars, with the words "We remember" written beneath. It was a fitting epitaph for a man who had spent his life making sure that humanity would never forget. Never forget the sacrifices they had made. Never forget the betrayals they had suffered. Never forget that the universe was vast and cold and unforgiving. But humanity had survived, more than survived. They had thrived. They had taken their place among the stars, not as servants but as equals, not as tools but as masters of their own fate. The galaxy had tried to break them. The Council had tried to betray them. And humanity had responded with the only answer that mattered. They had endured, they had fought, they had won. and they would never, ever kneel again. The Defiance was decommissioned 50 years after its death. By then, it was an ancient vessel, its technology outdated and its hull by decades of service. But it was not destroyed. Instead, it was preserved as a monument, placed in orbit around Earth where everyone could see it. Visitors came from across the galaxy to look at it. Some were human, wanting to touch a piece of their history. Some were alien, curious about the ship that had changed everything. They walked through its corridors and stood on its bridge and tried to imagine what it had been like to serve aboard it. The guides told them the story of the Swarm War and the Battle of Prime, the story of the campaign and the long hunt for the pirate lords, the story of the rebellion and the terrible battles that ended it, and the story of the day when Admiral Cole stood before the Galactic Council and refused to back down. That was the story people remembered most, the moment when humanity stopped being servants and became something else, the moment when the galaxy learned that humans were not to be trifled with. Some called it the Day of Reckoning. Others called it the birth of the new Earth. A few, mostly aliens who still resented humanity's rise, called it the Day of Shame. But most people, human and alien alike, simply called it the day when everything changed. And they were right, everything had changed. The galaxy was different now. Humanity was different now. The old order was gone, replaced by something new and uncertain and full of possibility. Cole had not lived to see most of it. He had died still worried about the future, still fearful that the peace he had won would not last. But his fears had not come true. The peace had lasted, not because the other species had learned to love humanity, but because they had learned to respect them. And maybe would have admitted that was enough. The universe was vast and cold and dangerous. There were always new threats, new challenges, new enemies to face. But humanity faced them together, united by the memory of what they had overcome. They had been double-crossed by the Council. They had been betrayed by those they had served. They had been pushed to the edge of destruction. And they had pushed back. Earth's Armada had brought total destruction to their enemies, but more importantly, it had brought freedom to their people. The freedom to live without fear. The freedom to grow and expand and explore. The freedom to be masters of their own destiny. That was Cole's legacy. That was what he had fought for. That was what he had died believing in. And as long as humanity remembered, that legacy would never die. The stars waited, vast and eternal, and among them the children of Earth moved forward unafraid. They had been small once. They had been weak. They had been servants and soldiers and tools. But not anymore. Now they were something more, something greater, something that the galaxy would never forget. They were human. And that was enough.